Morning, folks. It's Friday, which means by the time y'all watch this, your weekend is probably began. Gonna go ahead and do part two of my podcast on identity politics in America being over with as far as relevancy as we know it. I'm going to pick right up where I left off, talking about Bernie Sanders getting out on a picket line, walking with striking workers. Um, you know, Bernie does stuff like this because that's who he is. That's part of what being a socialist is. And I don't think there's enough discussion of that in the media whatsoever. There's all these seedy corporate types and conservatives who try to make democratic socialists out to be like they're some kind of boogeyman. But, if you read world history, if you know anything about current events or the way that democratic socialist governments around the world, in countries such as Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and a lot of the other European countries have elements of democratic socialism that are part of their government, part of their system. We have elements of democratic socialism in the American capitalist system as well. When you talk about things like Social Security, Medicare, VA, public health care for veterans, these are all things that would be considered under a democratic socialist platform. People that get pensions through work, whether it's a government pension or some kind of guaranteed pension that you get if you work in the corporate world or whatever you do for work. These would be things that democratic socialists believe in. Just like workers' rights is a big part of the democratic socialist platform, which is actually very pragmatic, first world and modern form of government. We've been mired in with all this propaganda revolving around the free market here in the United States, ever since our existence, ever since we came over here and started establishing the colonies and running the Native Americans off their lands. There's always been this, a lot of hustle in America, a lot of it's both our strength and our weakness, I suppose, that we're such an industrious people, that we are so entrepreneurial. But there's got to be some level of balance in American life, otherwise capitalism doesn't work. And that's what a guy like Bernie Sanders brings to the plate. You talk about the founding fathers of this country. They spoke a lot about checks and balances, and they had that in mind when they were writing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and talking about the separation of powers in government. If you go back and study civics in American history. And in recent years, with the horrible Supreme Court decision of 2009, Citizens United, which basically five fairly radical conservative Supreme Court justices defined money as free speech when talking about funding campaigns, and really they turned the election season into a free-for-all in this country, and allowed the billionaires, people like the Koch brothers, the Sheldon Adelsons of the world, even the Donald Trumps of the world, really, to just completely buy off our political system. And if you thought lobbyists and corporations and billionaires had too much power in the American form of government before, then it only got worse since 2009 with that Citizens United decision. That's what's led to a lot of these interest groups, these rather seedy business interest groups and right-wing groups, trying to bust up unions and seeing states under a full frontal right-wing assault funded by big money in states like Indiana and Wisconsin and Michigan. Like I said, these pragmatic Midwestern states that are where the people are known for being intelligent and practical, kind of down to earth and middle of the line. I mean, these are states where people largely support workers' rights, whether they consider themselves conservative or liberal. A lot of people have common sense around this part of the country. But because of Citizens United, you've got all these radical people coming to power, pushing things like right to work, which is very Orwellian and does the opposite of what it claims it does. I mean, folks, if you support the free market system and you support capitalism, you should support unions and workers' rights, because capitalism does not work without those checks and balances in play, both in government and especially with organizations like unions, which are independent, self-funded organizations. So my time's running up here. I want to talk a little bit about Donald Trump. I got a clock here so I know how much time I got on the video. I think one of the reasons Trump is striking a chord with so many people, you know, I talk about why Bernie's striking a chord, it's because he's honest, he's authentic. He doesn't take super PAC or corporate money. Donald Trump on the other side of things on the right, he's largely self-funding his campaign, so he's rather making a fool of the establishment candidates like Jeb Bush and the Scott Walkers of the world, who are taking all that super PAC money and the billionaire money and the Wall Street money. Donald's able to come out and really call them out on a lot of their political doublespeak. And he's calling them out on the fact that they're tied to these special interests, and that's why a guy like Trump is surging in the polls with kind of the, you know, the angry white guy vote. I know there's other people who support Trump, not just the angry white people, but that seems to be largely the base of his support. But you look at a guy like Trump, and in a way it's refreshing, you know, that he's running and making such a big stink. He's kind of become this power, Trumpenstein. Kind of like the Frankenstein of the Republican Party is what he's become. But the Republican Party has created Trump. You know, with the rise of the Tea Party and kind of the fight within the Republican Party for control, you got a guy like Trump that comes to the table and he can call these other candidates out and say, you're puppets for the 1%. Even though Donald is a part of the 1%, he largely made his money off real estate and casinos, and he, you know, had a wealthy father who made money largely in real estate for working people. But anyway, it's been refreshing to watch Trump. And another thing that Trump and Bernie have in common is they're speaking to the unpopularity of these terrible